Welcome to the Stream of Art podcast. Join me, Robyn.
And me, Michelle, as we chat openly about personal growth, creativity, and building a career in the arts. Right, Robyn? Well, I feel a little silly asking this because I've seen you a bunch this week. But anyway, for continuity's sake, how is your week?
It was busy. It was good, though. Lots of family visiting and lots of overindulging in food. I may have overdone it a little bit, but I don't know. Yeah, but it's good. Just busy, and I'm kind of catching up on sleep. And yeah, I don't have much to say or update you on, really. And we did just see each other like 2 days ago.
Yeah, and before that, we had seen each other like
that's right.
Christmas Eve. So yeah,
we've seen each other like 3 times. Yeah.
Yeah, we saw each other more in this last week than I think we have in, the last few months.
Yeah.
Aside from obviously our weekly chats, but like in person.
Of course. How was your week?
My week was pretty good. It was definitely involved some indulgence in food that I don't normally have. Actually, thanks to you, because you spoiled me with some really incredible vegan chocolate and candy, and you got me that vegan cake that was really good too. It's not something I would have gotten myself, but because you got it for me, I felt like I could really like properly indulge. So I enjoyed every inch of it that I had. It was very good.
I'm really good at enabling people to overindulge. It's one of my superpowers.
Well, I'm very appreciative of that superpower after this week. It's funny because I basically don't eat anything with sugar at all. So to have even that little bit, there wasn't a lot, but it was enough that I definitely felt off. I felt a little bit like I had some stuff my body's not used to.
Yeah.
But I actually bounced back pretty quick. So I feel like, like I got away with it. But yeah, I also got off my sleep schedule. So I feel a little bit, I think I might have also been playing some catch up on the sleep too. I think I mentioned in the last episode that one of my struggles last year was getting to bed on time. So I had a lot of nights where I just didn't get enough sleep. And I think having just this week, it's almost like I just give myself some permission I don't normally to just like get extra sleep. And I was up late a few nights as we were talking about. I got the game Baldur's Gate 3 as a gift from my brother. And it's a really fun game, which is a bit of a problem. Because I have a bit of an addictive personality. So when I get really into something, I get really into it. And so it's hard to exercise restraint. And again, it's partly a product of just the week. Just the last week of December, I gave myself some more leeway that I wouldn't have. Otherwise, I'm sure that once I get back into the routine, it'll be a lot easier to put boundaries around my gaming again. That's usually what I do, is I have like designated gaming times on the weekend. But yeah, that also contributed to a few later nights than I'm accustomed to. But I don't know. I feel like it was worth it. I had a fun week. It was also pretty busy. I mean, we officially launched the podcast this week.
Yes.
Which is very exciting. There's been a lot of editing going on behind the scenes and a lot of getting things linked up so, everybody can listen on their podcast player of choice. So thank you for anybody who has listened. I know we do have a few people we've shared with so far who've given a listen, and specifically also to my mom who tested. She was our first test listener.
And she said good things. Thank goodness.
She did. It was very encouraging. So yeah, it was nice to get some feedback, but it was very exciting to be able to officially share that. And I'm really glad that we started it at the end of the year. I think it's the kind of thing it would have been really easy to put off until January, but I'm so glad we're already in a rhythm of recording these every week. And
100%.
I'm now in a rhythm of how to edit and all of that. So I'm so grateful that we did that, because I have a lot going on the first few months of the year, and it'll just be nice to have this just be a thing that's already on the schedule, up and running.
In motion. Yeah. It also feels like we kind of got a head start on the new year as well, because I know I had this kind of slated as like an activity for 2024. And I was able to kind of like check that box off. And I'm like, oh, it's not even 2024 yet. And I accomplished this thing. which is, feels exciting for sure.
Yeah. With that, do we want to jump into talking about our plans for 2024? Actually, maybe you can start us off this week.
Yeah, sure. Where to start? So I mean, last episode, I think I mentioned that like I likely wouldn't have a plan for 2024 by this point, and I was wrong. That's one thing I've realized, like with this podcast, what's going to be really annoying but also hilarious is I'm probably going to contradict myself every week.
Same.
Yeah. So I feel the need to call myself out on what I said last week and like point out that I was incorrect. But so I had done sort of a 5-year plan, and this was back in maybe November, and it was I got this idea from someone that I know, and he does this kind of 5-year plan for himself, and I was like, oh, it's an interesting idea. And he kind of like looks at his life and he looks at like what does he want to have accomplished 5 years from now. And so I did the same thing, and then I kind of like broke out sort of the key milestones I'd need to do every year to kind of accomplish those 5-year milestones. And so I had completely forgotten that I'd done this thing. So I actually kind of had an annual plan for 2024 already outlined. So I kind of just revisited it and just looked to see like, does it still resonate? Does this seem doable? And there were quite a few tweaks that I had to make, because I definitely I have a tendency to overcommit myself, right? So and then I don't follow through. Like I I shoot for things that are way beyond what is actually reasonable to accomplish. So anyways, but I have like a kind of a good outline. And I think going into 2024, what I've decided to abandon the idea of the resolutions, but to embrace the idea of making promises to myself. And one of the promises that I want to make to myself for this year is to be gentle on myself. And I also really want to work hard at embracing the tiny, tiny steps, because I find that what happens with me is I have that kind of all or nothing mindset. And so, and it's the same thing every year where it's like, I want to exercise more. And it's like, okay, well, and then I always lay out like these, like, okay, I'm going to exercise 3 days a week or something. But right now I'm not exercising at all. So to go from 0 to 3 days a week, it's just not feasible. Like I'll stick with that until the novelty wears off. So like until February, and then I'm back to, just doing nothing. And so I'm trying to really abandon that idea and just do the tiniest thing. And it feels like I have such a resistance to just doing small things, because it feels like, what's the point? But I'm trying to really embrace that idea of like, even just the tiniest little movement forward or just the tiniest little change can actually have ripple effects, right? So I have kind of developed some promises for myself that are really like, yes, be gentle on myself, focus on the tiny steps. So I have like a little habit tracker now that I've done, and it's like,
nice.
And I'm talking like really small. I'm like, how small can I make this action every day? And so one of them is like to do a yoga pose. Like that's it. I just have to do a yoga pose, and then I can check that box off. Meditation is something that I want to work into my routine. So like meditation and mindfulness. So I'm starting off with like 4 deep breaths, and that's it. Any time during the day. So just like super, super, super small. And I'm hoping that I'll actually be able to stick with that. And if I can't, I don't know what to do. I give up.
I guess it's just not meant to be.
It's just not meant to be. I'm not meant to be mindful or like moving my body.
I think what you said is really profound. The idea of embracing just the small steps, because it is so easy to fall into that all or nothing trap. Like either I go really big or I don't do anything. There's this really beautiful quote from Zeno that goes, well-being is realized in small steps, but it is no small thing. And that's really something I've found helpful for myself, because I very much suffer from that same all or nothing kind of mentality. And I used to do that all the time. And the new year was especially bad, because I had the same sort of things where I'm like, I'm going to, get my exercise on point. I'm going to meditate, do the mindfulness thing. I'm going to do all like A, B, C, D. Like I'm going to do all these things, and they're all going to happen, and a switch is going to flip, and I'm going to be a new person.
Exactly.
And I'm suddenly going to do all these things. But what ultimately has helped me get to a point where I do have some of these things already in place is just the daily tracking certain things. So like for me, making the switch from I have to exercise every day to I just have to move my body every day. So
Right.
sometimes that is more often than not that is exercise. I do a lot of weight training, but you know, like today is more of like a rest day. I might go for a walk. I'll probably do some stretching before bed. Like that's it. Like I don't feel this pressure to like have to do crazy intense workouts every day because now I just have this one little thing I track and it can be super small. So that's been helpful with my music as well. I think I mentioned before how I have this streak going. I think it's like 4.5 years now where I haven't missed a day of doing something musical, but that's because it's so small. My requirement is just to do something musical.
Right.
And there have been a couple of days where all I've had time for is like 5 minutes to make a quick loop in Ableton. Like that's all I've had time to do, but I did it so I wasn't going to break that chain.
Right.
So I think you're right. I would be very surprised if you didn't find this effective. I mean, it's sort of the premise behind Atomic Habits, right, by James Clear is
Yes.
all these little tiny habits. And as one of the things I think I remember him talking about is like make it be something so small that you feel ridiculous not doing it.
Exactly.
Like to not take 4 deep breaths, you'd feel like, what? Just do it. Like
Why?
it's so small. Do one yoga pose. That's so small. Like so it forces you to do it because you know you almost refuse to be the kind of person who won't do just that much. So
right. You make it. I love how you put that. You know, it's like absurd that you couldn't push yourself to do that little tiny thing. And what's kind of cool too, like, so I did it this morning. Like, I mean, we're not into 2024 yet, but you know, I did my yoga pose this morning, but I didn't just do a yoga pose. Like I did a few other things too.
Yeah.
I didn't have to, but it was just like, well, I'm here now. I might as well do like a couple other like poses and stretches and stuff, right? So with the art stuff this year, I think I'm just going to kind of focus on sort of putting myself together a bit. I think I've lost the thread in terms of what I want. And because I've gotten so confused by what everyone else is accomplishing and doing and wanting. And so I actually did spend some time, and it was a really interesting exercise. And I kind of created this exercise out of a combination of like things we've talked about and things I've sort of read elsewhere. But I just kind of sat down and I went through like, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And what was really interesting about that exercise actually was that a lot of my strengths were things that serve other people. So like a lot of like, I'm trying to think of specific examples, but you know, like I'm very hardworking and I follow through if there's a deadline, you know, like I'm accountable. I follow through. Like if you ask me to do something, I will do it when you expect it to be done. And then my weaknesses though, were all around showing up for myself. So like I'm accountable to other people, but not to myself. I set goals, you know, if I set goals within a work setting, I will try to do my best to meet that goal. You know, if there's an expectation, I'm going to meet that expectation. But if it's coming from me, if it's a goal I set for myself or it's an expectation of myself, I won't follow through on it. So it was very telling to kind of see my strengths and weaknesses and realize that like where I'm actually really weak is showing up for myself and caring for myself. So that was really interesting. And then I kind of went through like, who am I not? Like in this moment, who am I not? And I listed out all these things that I'm not. Like I'm not bubbly, for instance. I'm not someone who likes to be the center of attention. I'm like all sorts of different things. And then I went through and I crossed out the things that I don't actually care about. So like, I don't care to be bubbly. I don't need that. But what remained were things that I do want to be better at. So one of them is like showing up for myself. And then I went through, who am I? And I put all like the goods and the bads, and I crossed out all the things that I want to leave behind. So like being super stressed and anxious all the time. Like I don't want, you know, that's who I am right now, but I don't want that to be to continue. And so what I'm left with is kind of like these two lists of like who I'm not and who I am, and with the things that don't matter or the things that I want to leave behind crossed off. And so I'm left with a list of like, I think what I kind of defined as my authentic self. I'm like, that's me. It's just that I'm not really living in alignment with that right now. It was a really cool process, and it would be fun to do I'll do something that kind of walks people through this, because I think there's something here for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And then it was kind of looking at this list of like my authentic self, and it's like, okay, well, what small things can I implement to kind of start getting back to that? And
Right.
and what accommodations do I need in order to do that? So it was a whole process. It was very revealing, I guess, for lack of a better word. And I think it's something I'll continue to do on a regular basis, just as a sort of like centering activity. So when I'm feeling like I'm getting confused by everything else around me, just like kind of come back to this and do this exercise again and check. It's really a check-in with myself. So that was kind of, I did all that, and then I went into my reviewing the annual plan that I'd actually already drafted up for myself. And from there I was able to kind of tweak things to be a bit more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course factoring in that this year I really do just want to be more gentle on myself and more patient with myself too. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so glad you took the time to do that, because even just as you're talking right now, I feel this sort of like peace from you that I haven't felt as we've talked over the last few months. You seem like it was a really, like, it was definitely a really fulfilling activity for you to take part in.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of doing something to help other people walk through that, because I think it's so important.
Yeah, it was the first time I'd really kind of seen myself clearly, I think.
Mm.
And really seen, like, I know that I'm really hard on myself, and I know that I know that I don't show up for myself the way that I need to, but to see it so clearly, like, to have it in writing like that, where I'm seeing like my strengths and I'm seeing my weaknesses and realizing that my strengths are all in service of other people and my weaknesses are like, it just realizing like I give so much of myself to everyone else, but I can't do that. I can't give myself the same kind of care or attention or accountability or, whatever. It was a bit of a wake up call. It's like, I
Hmm.
deserve to treat myself better. Like
Yeah.
so yeah, it was really helpful, and I will spend some time at some point kind of explaining that process a bit more, and we can maybe post it somewhere. I don't know, because I do think it would be a helpful thing for other people to go through if you're kind of in the state where I'm in, where I'm kind of just like really wanting to take a hard look at things and get
Yeah.
super honest.
Yeah, I think it would be worth even having a full episode at some point about figuring out your vision for your life and for art, and figuring out like your why. I've come to the conclusion over the last couple of years, also, that just how important it is to really know who you are and to be able to clearly define what you want, and to acknowledge, like, I think it's so profound that you're able to acknowledge that you're not living in alignment with your authentic self, because once you can diagnose that, like, now you can start actively taking steps to get there. I think
Yeah,
for so many people there's this sense that something's off, but they're not sure where to start. And maybe that's the
100%.
best place to start, is like, well, who am I and what do I actually want? What about my life isn't aligning with that? Because I think for the most part, people are not living lives that are really true to themselves and what they really came here to do.
Yeah. And it's a really, I think the issue too is that we end up feeling, or in my case anyways, I end up feeling broken. Like things feel
Mm,
off and I feel like it's because I'm broken, and then it's like, no, it's not actually the case. It's just that you're a little bit out of line, and that's okay. Like there's things you can do
mhm.
to kind of get back there. And it's none of it, it's not like a huge life overhaul. Like, so
Yeah.
I'm looking like, oh yeah, I'm kind of off there, right? Like
Yeah.
one of the things that I had listed in the who am I not right now is active and energized. I'm not that right now. I'm not particularly active. I'm not particularly energized, but I
Mhm.
want to be. And it's like, I want to be
Right.
because that is part of who I am at my core. That is a value that I have. I'm just not living it right now. But to get there, it's not a ton of work. Like I can just go for a walk once a week, and that's a little step towards getting back to that person. It was kind of empowering in a way, like to have that clarity, and then to realize it's not because of any sort of fundamental personality flaws or anything.
Mhm.
It's just that this happens. We get busy and we don't do this kind of self-reflection, and then this is what happened, like you just kind of drift away. So yeah, it was a really good exercise, and it I feel more confident heading into this year than I have in any other year.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like I really have narrowed in on some of the key issues here. And even if I don't make any moves this year to address them, at least I know what they are. And I'm okay with that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that ties in to something we've talked about before where it's helpful to look on like a bigger time scale. So these are things that you'll likely be addressing, for years going forward. Like, to really establish a life that feels like it's in alignment with who you are, that's not an overnight thing or even over a single year thing. And I think it is helpful to just take that pressure off of yourself to like make this year be the year you get all of that organized and just say, well, these are having that clarity means I can start taking some small actions in that direction without the expectation that I'm going to get it all figured out this year.
Yeah.
It's going to be an ongoing journey. And I think that's what you want it to be, because for a lot of things, they're going to be influenced by the other things happening in your life and where you are and what you're doing. And so you always want to be in this active conversation with yourself about how what you're doing is lining up with what you want and how effective it is and how realistic it is. Because, as we've talked a lot about before, planning is great, but there is going to be a point where you might find that something you've planned for is just not measuring up in one way,
Exactly.
shape, or form. So to be able to have that malleability to say, okay, well, this isn't working, let's make some adjustments. I think that's really powerful. And then that should just be the way that we're always living, is this constant, having this rugged flexibility, as Brad Stulberg talked about in his book, Master of Change, where we have this strong sense of like who we are. That would be like the ruggedness. So knowing what our core values are, but then having that flexibility to navigate life and all the different changes that happen, and finding a way to be flexible in how we apply those values. So I'm really excited to see how this year, this year and then the years coming up unfold for you, because I that feels, again, just from what I feel coming off of you as we're talking, I feel like this is bigger, maybe even than you realize right now. I feel this big shift in you.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is because I'm off work too, which is when you have time off, I always feel much calmer when I'm not working. But it is, yeah, I think things are kind of starting to click in my brain a bit. And then with the art plan, like my plan for my art business or whatever you want to call it, there are some milestones, but primarily I want to do kind of a similar process of self-reflection, and because I have so many ideas and I've been jotting them down, and I get really, one of the things I really struggle with is I get like distracted by the new shiny object. So like I'll come up with this really cool idea, and then it's like I chase that for a while and then it doesn't really go anywhere. And I get pulled in so many different directions. And I think really ultimately it's a lack of focus. It's a lack of understanding what I actually want from this art business. So spending this year, there's some things I'll continue to do. Like I want to aim for 4 to 6 art shows again this year. And I want to get my website like a little bit revamped. And so there's things like that. But behind the scenes, like I want to really spend some time to get clear on what I want this business to accomplish, and then go through all of these ideas that I've had and see how they fit within that, and like what can I leave and what can I implement, and like what's the plan for that. And so really just it's ultimately doing business planning this year. So, and I think I'm ready for it. I think it's something I've been needing to do, but I just haven't been ready for that stage. And I think I'm there now. So it's like, I'm looking forward to the year ahead. I think it will be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a great word for it. Yeah, I like the idea of having this sort of like realistic optimism about the new year. Being hopeful and being like excited to see what happens, but not being like, everything's going to change this year.
No, exactly.
Because then nothing changes. Because then you get, how many of us have had that experience where you get to the end of the year and you're like, well, I accomplished none of what I thought I would.
Right.
Or you accomplish things, but because they weren't part of your list, you don't recognize them, which we talked a lot about last in the last episode about not acknowledging your wins, enough, and not commending yourself enough for the things you do accomplish.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, if you can reflect more on that kind of deeper level of, was I doing the things that supported what I determined I cared about, that is much more accurate to I think what is reasonable for like a life well lived.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm going into the year too. I think most of the time, like with the new year, I enter the new year with all these expectations of where I'll be a year from now. I never like I don't admit this to anyone. Like the past like 3 or 4 years, I'm like I'm not going to set any New Year's resolutions, but in my mind, I set these secret resolutions, and I have this kind of like dream of where I'll be a year from now, and I don't have any expectations for 2024. Like I am just going in curious,
Yeah.
and I'll do my best to move forward with the various things that I have kind of outlined for myself, but I also am fully aware that I might not hit the milestones that I'm kind of setting out. I may not do the things that I thought I would be doing, and I'm totally okay with that. Like I'm just going to go with it. And we'll see how that works out this year. And I think I'll just again, like being gentle on myself and taking the time to kind of self-reflect and then adjusting as needed. That's the philosophy I'm going to apply to 2024.
Yeah. I love that.
But I'm curious. I'm so curious. We've talked so much about me. I'm so curious to hear what your plans are, because I think you have a really interesting, like I'm a little bit more like laissez-faire right now with this stuff, just because that's kind of where I'm at. Mm-hmm. But you have like a really nice strategy, I think, for planning your year, and because you talk about like working in quarters and stuff like that, right? And so I'm so curious to hear what you've kind of outlined for yourself. And I also just like you and I have very different ways of approaching planning. But like your ability to follow through on things is like extremely admirable. Like I wish I was more like that, more like that, and maybe one day I'll get there. But like I love the way you are, where it's like, here's the things I'm going to do. It's very like strategic, and you actually do them, which is crazy to me.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very kind. I think maybe part of the reason why I've become so structured is that for a long time I did struggle to see things through. And it was through having more of a tight, set of systems or routines that I was actually able to get some things done. Some of that also just ties into having certain deadlines. So, I talked a little bit last week about doing RPM. Right. That was really when I first started actually seeing music through to the end. Again, they're not completely finished in the sense that they're not up on Spotify yet. I want to get my all of my RPM albums like properly mixed and mastered before I do that. But like to actually see a project through that I then shared out in the world, that was really my first instance of doing that. So yeah, I was really bad at it for a long time, but I'm getting better at it now for sure. And I think maybe part of that comes down to just being ready.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, it's just kind of like, okay, I'm tired of this. Like, let's just make this happen for myself. Yeah.
And it started with like getting my blog posts up. I've tried blogging on and off for years, probably like 15 or 16 years, and it just never stuck. But it wasn't until like fall 2022 when I just made the decision, I'm just going to release an episode, or not an episode. Sorry, I'm podcast on the brain. I'm gonna release a post every Monday, and I just stuck with it. I mean, it helps too that like I have my mom edit my blog post, so she knew I was on this deadline. So
right,
there is a level of accountability. I think accountability for me is really, really helpful. And you and I were talking about that earlier, but just like releasing this podcast, it was. I mean, I had plans to do a podcast. I was reading over my journal from last year. Or this past year, all the instances I said, I'm going to get started on this podcast, I'm going to get started. It isn't until you and I got together to do one that I actually saw it through to the end. So
right.
I also need the accountability. And I think that's also why I saw RPM through, because I was doing it with other people. So there is a sort of level of accountability with my blog posts, just knowing that I have somebody who edits And I do have a few readers. So, and then just for myself too, I think because it's been such an issue for me, that was one way I was trying to take care of myself a little bit more and to honor myself was to actually get things done.
Right.
And part of what's really helped me do that, so again, keeping it on theme with the blog post, is having designated time where I write throughout the week so that it's not me just trying to haphazardly fit in blog writing with a schedule that's too rigid, that doesn't have any room. I've actually like crafted a routine that makes time for that all through the week. So that's been super helpful. I guess on that note, I'll talk a little bit about my plan for next year. So it's very much still an outline. I want to retain some freedom and flexibility and just let the year kind of unfold. But I do have a plan. This is my first year planning the year ahead like this, because I've also really struggled with like trying to do too much right at the start of the year.
Right.
And of course, falling short in a lot of ways. But as I reflected on this past year, a lot of my improvements happened sort of at various stages through the year. So there's certain things I did adopt at the start of 2023 that I have stuck with. But there are a lot of changes I made that have stuck that didn't happen until like the halfway point. So it really helped me to see just how effective it is to make change just be a regular part of my existence, and not just change so much as like upgrading. So I upgraded a lot of things in my life this past year. And so that's kind of the theme I want to go into the new year with, is like continuing to upgrade. I left behind a lot of stuff that wasn't serving me. So I still have a little bit of that. It's kind of kicking around that I have to drop, but it's much less than it was before. So I'm actually not going to be changing too much. So my day-to-day is going to be roughly the same. Like I've got a daily routine that is like solid. So that actually really helped me in planning for my year, because I know realistically what I can fit in within my schedule. And actually it helped me to kind of leave a couple of things behind that I thought I was going to do next year. But I just realized I don't think I'm going to have time. So if at some point I find myself with more time than I expected, or if I clear something off my plate sooner than I expected, I can pull those things back in. But otherwise, they're kind of on the back burner until 2025. So I'm not even going to worry about them. And part of why I structured my year the way I have, I'll get into the specifics in a minute, but just wanted to set up sort of my thought process. Because I'm really guilty of, like having too many things on my plate, just in general. So not even just with the start of the year, where I think, okay, these are all the things I'm going to do. Just in general, I have so many things I want to do that it leaves me feeling pretty overwhelmed, because I have this like sense of, it's like the opportunity cost. Like, well, if I'm doing this thing, there's all these other things I could be doing that would be maybe just as fulfilling or just as beneficial to my personal development or my career or whatever. And so, I wanted to avoid that completely this year. And I got a little bit better about that this past year, where as I was getting more consistent with planning in quarterly chunks, I was better about saying, okay, this next quarter, I know these are the things I'm working on. I'm just not going to have time for these other things. And I was being better about leaving things off my plate. But this year, I actually want to structure my whole year that way, where I'm just right out of the gate saying no to certain things that I just know I won't have time for.
Right.
Or I'm delaying things. So quarterly planning. So I've talked about this before. I was inspired by Cal Newport. He has this multi-scale planning system where he does quarterly and weekly planning and then daily planning. And then I guess like a yearly review, I think he does in June, like around his birthday. But I really love that idea of structuring my time, because I got pretty good about structuring my days, as I mentioned, and it's gotten better over time as I've included larger scale methods of planning. But I never really set out to look beyond just like the first quarter. So, or the quarter that's coming up. So I'm actually looking at the year ahead in 4 quarters.
Right.
So I have, January, February, March, and like April, May, June, July, and so on. So like each 3-month period is going to be where I'm putting certain things I want to work on over the course of the year. So I'm going to leave some room. So like quarter 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to leave some more space, just because I don't know exactly what could be happening then. And like, as far as specifics, I don't want to plan specifics that far ahead. That I'll do when I do my quarterly planning for each quarter. But I do have at least a general sense of the things I'm going to be doing within each quarter. So what I did was I broke down all of my goals and objectives and aspirations and projects for the year into different categories. So I have like a category for music, so my musical goals. I have teaching, so things that I do to improve as a teacher. Anything that's like personal development is another category. I have Michelle Minette Music, which is like my business. So anything that's like business related. And then I have reading as like a separate activity because it's something that is a big part of my life and a big part of my work. So I like to take that seriously and actually plan out like different reading objectives for the year. And so I'm spreading all these different things out over the course of the year. So like for music, for example, I have what I call like my big three. So that's guitar, songwriting, and it's singing. So I have certain objectives I want to meet within each of those realms. So guitar, I really want to work on my improvising this year. So it's something I've been working on off and on over the years, and I definitely have improved, but it's just one of those areas I still know I'm not the guitarist I could be. And so that's going to be like my focal point for the year. And for each quarter, I'm going to have something I'm doing specifically to address that. So like I have this backlog of all these guitar courses. I'm just going to go through some of the ones that I know will help me in that world. So I have like one really big one I'm going to be doing through the first quarter of the year, maybe into the second if I need more time. That's again where that flexibility is coming in. And then I have a couple of other smaller ones that I'm going to be doing, but that's kind of it. And then besides that, I want to just stay on top of like my guitar proficiency. So making sure I'm doing things that keep up my guitar chops and all of that. So that's kind of ongoing. Singing is going to be kind of just maintenance. You know, I don't really have any specific things I want to improve vocally beyond just the overall, you know, quality of my voice for my songwriting.
Right.
For songwriting, I wanted to get my debut album finished, like the demos. So I actually also created a bit of a timeline for my debut album. So I'd like to finish all the demos by the end of 2024. That'll be like what my go-to project for the year. That'll be it. And 2025, I'd really like to go get it produced and recorded. And then I want to release it 2026. I feel like that is a realistic enough sort of timeline for me to be able to do it. Of course, again, it's going to be flexible. It'll depend on what else is going on, resources, all of that. But that's what I'm sort of aiming for at this point. And the other musical goal I wanted, this actually kind of ties into songwriting, is I really want to work on my mixing skills this year. And I specifically have a goal, sort of a goal outline for the year. So for the first quarter of the year, I have a bunch of these mixing courses I'm just going to be going through again and, you know, really diving deep into. And then hopefully quarter two, I'd like to actually start taking mixing lessons.
Oh, cool.
So this will be something that'll, you know, saying this on the podcast will kind of help me hold myself accountable to that a little bit. Because it'd be so easy to just kind of let it happen like the last year where, you know, I had this intention to get better at mixing and I think I did a little bit, but like not to the degree I'd wanted to. And I think I need more structure, and specifically I need feedback. I need somebody telling me what I need to do to improve, because I'm at this very frustrating stage with my mixing. I think anybody who mixes music knows this, where it's your mix doesn't sound right, or it just sounds bad and you just don't know how to fix it. And so I know I need more guidance. You know, there's only so many courses in the world I can do, and at this point I've done a bunch, and I'm missing something. I think a teacher is just the missing piece. But I'm going to have to be in a position to do that, so I'm going to wait until the second quarter.
Yeah. It's also just like that phase is so frustrating where it's like, I know enough now to know that this is not good, but I don't know enough to know how to fix it. I've been there with art too, where it's like, I know this is not good, but I don't know what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that Ira Glass quote about, you know, trying to close that taste gap where your taste is like so far ahead of your abilities.
Yes.
So you exist in this very frustrating place as you're trying to get there. And I had that with my guitar playing for a lot of years. That's actually one area I didn't give myself credit in this past year, because I mentioned in the last episode that I hadn't improved on guitar as much as I'd wanted to. One thing that did happen this past year is that my playing really crystallized. So I feel like the stuff that I do well, I did really well this year. Like I think kind of came into my voice as a guitar player, especially with regards to my songwriting and like writing guitar parts for my songs. So that was a sort of a win from last year that I didn't think about. But now I want to elevate my skills there. But yeah, so mixing is going to be something I'm actually going to take active steps to get there. And again, I know I can do that because I already have designated time in my schedule to work for that, on that. So totally reasonable for me to do. But it means like I've dropped a lot of the other musical things that I've tried to carry for years. I mean, right now I can't practice drums because I don't have my drum set in this apartment. They're packed away in storage. So that's sort of like, that's forced me to take that off the table. But, you know, I might try to do like some piano stuff. And I think I'm just going to take that off the plate altogether, aside from anything I do potentially to help me for songwriting. So if there's anything, I don't know, sort of chord things I want to work on just to help with my songwriting, that's different because then that's more in support of my songwriting.
Yes.
Which is one of my big three. But I'm not going to be trying to improve on piano for the sake of improving on piano. Like I just not at this point. Maybe down the road, but I'm also okay if that doesn't happen. I know who I am now, so that'll be a bonus if I can make time for that down the road. But just this year, I'm just taking it off my plate completely.
I love that sort of taking things off your plate. Like I did a similar thing where, because I have a tendency to just like want to do everything, and it's like that's not realistic. And so I actually created like a list of like approved activities for myself, and I can't do anything outside of that list, right? So because there's all sorts. So I took blog writing off of the list, for instance, because I don't.
Smart.
I've tried, like you, I've tried on multiple occasions, and I never stick with it. And I'm like, I'm taking this off the list. It's not an approved activity for 2024. I find that really helpful because again, it like forces you to sort of focus. And then the other thing I did too, because like I do like to like watch courses, and like I'm part of a group that has like a really amazing online, almost like a campus where there's like so many different like resources on anything to do with like building an art business. And so I'll often, you know, watch videos on there. But the problem is it's introducing things that you could be implementing, right? So I've made a rule for myself where it's like I can watch those videos and take notes and learn, but I'm not allowed to implement anything new. So if there's something something new that I learn about, I'm not allowed to implement it this year. And it just like, I think sometimes you have to be really like hard lined about that stuff, right? Like, no, not allowed.
Yeah.
Stay focused.
Yeah, I think. And that just comes with recognizing how finite your time and attention are. You know, I think it's something easier to trick yourself with. And you think, I'm going to do all these things. And like, because you're imagining a year and you're like, a year is so long. You know, you can do so many, I can do all these things over the course of a year, but you're not taking into account what your day looks like, what your week typically looks like. So it is so easy to assume you can do these things and without a plan or without a realistic plan. And then you fall short and you feel terrible when really you were trying to do something that was just never possible. Whereas, you know, if you can just, like take things off your plate, I think there's so much power in doing less. It was something I read recently about Ryan Holiday, who writes for the Daily Stoic. He's an author and speaker, and he talked about how he and his wife made that their like focus for, it might have been 2022 or something, was just less. Like, let's do less of all the stuff that doesn't matter and like more of the stuff that really matters, like spending time with their sons and like all that sort of thing. So because when you're letting go of the things that either don't serve you or that just aren't possible right now, you make more room for the things that do matter. It lets you make like the main thing, which again is why it's so helpful to define who you are and what it is you do best and what it is you want to do, because then it makes it so much easier to look at all the other things. Because we all have those things where like, oh, it would be really nice to like do this thing or to learn this thing. But when it comes down to it, I mean, anytime you put into learning something or creating something is time that could be spent doing something else. And maybe that is the best use of your time, but often it isn't. And it's something that you almost turn into an obligation when really it's just more of a passing interest. So if you can just let it go. Yeah. And that's sort of like the approach I'm taking to a lot of things this year is like, what can I just let go? And in creating more space, I'm also kind of hoping that let's say I get to the end of a particular goal or project that I have assigned to a particular quarter, of the year, I'm hoping I might be able to just use any extra time I'm afforded to just like take a breath or to give
Right.
myself some more rest. So if I'm sort of meeting my expectations and surpassing them and getting things done early rather than immediately reaching for the next thing, just give myself a little extra space
Yeah.
just to like be.
Yeah.
So it's like almost putting a quota on the amount of work I'm willing to do this year, just so I can maybe have a little bit of time while still accomplishing the things that I want to accomplish. So, I've selected things that are really important to me, but that are also, I think, achievable.
Right. Did you find like, because you've kind of, you have your different sort of like buckets, and then you've kind of assigned them to different quarters. Like, did you find that process made it easier for you to see the year and be like, yeah, I've got to shift things around here. I've got to move things out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
did that help you kind of visualize your time a little more clearly than you had in the past?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, like, a good example is something I talked about in one of our first podcasts was how one of the things I'd like to do is get back into playing live again and to
Right.
connect with, other people more. And I had sort of originally thought, well, maybe come springtime, that's the kind of thing I can look into getting out there and doing stuff. And that's still something I want to do, but just looking at my year and looking at the things I want to accomplish, sort of preparing myself for another year of like predominantly being in isolation, just
Right.
spending time alone, just working on my music and working on my business with the end objective of eventually bringing that more into my life. Like I do want to be more involved in music within the city, and I do want to go out and play live again. I do really miss it. But I think just looking at each quarter and thinking about each chunk of time and like the things I have planned, I just don't know that I'll be able to make it work in a
Right.
way that wouldn't diminish the other things I'm doing, or in a way that would make my live performances or my interactions with people less because I have all these other things going on. So I think for me, it'll be about getting all these other things in place where like, I don't have plans for my exercising this year because that's already there. I don't have
Right.
plans to do meditation this year. That's already there. So like those things, things like practicing, all of that's already there. My blog, this podcast now, it feels like such a weight lifted in just having these things that are just on the go. Like I have these
Right.
systems in place, they're just rolling. So, more of my focus has to be on getting that last piece in place, which is YouTube, which is that's a lot of work. I know just from, hearing people talk about it. So I don't have the experience of actually making a YouTube video yet, but that is going to be like one of my biggest projects for the year. And it's actually, I have that slated for quarter 1 because I got to get that up and running. Because once I get that up and running, I can reevaluate.
Yeah. Because you said that you've built in time because you're not quite sure like
Yeah,
how long some of these things are going to take, right? And I feel like things like video editing and stuff probably will take longer than you sort of expect it to take.
exactly.
I'm also curious too, like because like you have you have your year quite scheduled,
Hmm.
and you have your days quite scheduled. And I'm curious, like, do you build in time for like those like maybe unexpected opportunities? Like, do you factor that in at all, or do you say like if I don't know, I don't even know what I mean by unexpected opportunity. Like, I don't know if there's like
I know what you mean.
yeah, like additional students that come on, or if there is like an opportunity to play a gig. Like, do you have you built time in to be able to say yes to those things, or are those things you'd have to say no to?
It's a really good question. I do have flexibility. So the only reason my schedule works is because it is rugged and flexible. So there is sort of a consistent structure to my days, but because I don't plan my days out, I only plan my day out like the night before. So
Oh, okay.
I have a lot of flexibility. I do time block planning. So I was starting my time block plan for Monday.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I always do it the night before. So if an opportunity comes up, for like 2 weeks from now, if it's something that is not too much of a time commitment and it aligns with one of the other, like one of my core musical
Right.
values or something, it works with something I'm already working towards, I will make time for that thing. A lot of that just comes down to having a lot of autonomy. So I definitely can make room for more students and make room for opportunities that come up. But I won't just say yes to anything. It has to support what I'm trying to do. But I also don't want to just immediately say no to things. I'm trying to be
Right.
better about saying no to myself this year, to be like, no, you can't do that thing yet. You just can't, because I have a really difficult time respecting my own boundaries, and I seem to have this idea that I'm superhuman or something, and that I can conjure extra time out of thin air, that I'm really realizing is just not the case.
Right.
So for me, it's more about not allowing myself to take on more than I can reasonably accomplish. But yeah, I definitely don't want to turn down an opportunity if it's going to be something that is either professionally fulfilling or personally fulfilling or musically fulfilling. Like there is some wiggle room for sure. It's just all about being intentional. That's really
Right.
my main thing, is anything I do has to be done intentionally.
Right. Which means you need to go into the year with a clear understanding of what it is you want, like what it is you want to accomplish, or where you want to focus your time, or
Yeah.
which I don't quite have yet. And I don't think I will have it for this year. And that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming for me, like just years and years of doing different things with schedules and routines and systems, and I'm just kind of getting to the point where I feel like I've got my arms around the things I'm working on.
Yeah.
But a lot of this is actually kind of an experiment, because this is my first time planning to this degree, where I'm actually looking at each quarter at the start of the year and putting things, so I'm going to go into a quarter already kind of knowing what I had planned.
Right.
Of course, again, there's flexibility where I can take something out if I need to, but I feel like I know my schedule well enough, and I know how I work well enough to know that I can actually get these things accomplished.
Yeah. It's really interesting. And I think like what you have that I'm lacking right now is a better overall sense of what you want to accomplish with your business as a whole, right? Which is missing for me. And so it's extremely challenging to act with intention when you don't really have a sense of what you're trying to build in the first place. So it's interesting, and it sounds like you've spent so much time, obviously, just developing a structure for your week or for your day, and developing those habits and stuff. And so now you kind of have this framework in place that you can, I love how you said earlier, upgrading, like versus changing. Like, I love that. Like, you're just kind of upgrading everything. It's perfect.
Yeah, because I don't really need to change much. The stuff I'm doing now is going to get me where I want to go. It's just about putting the right projects in focus. But I have all the structure in place to actually get this stuff done. Yeah, and again, that's just a byproduct of a lot of years of experimentation and a lot of years of failing and realizing what doesn't work, and then finding stuff that does work and going, oh, I just have to move more in that direction.
Yeah. And I think like finding things that work for you specifically, which is going to obviously look different. And I'm so curious to see, like, once I kind of get my act together, I'm so curious to see, like, will I fall into a similar system as you, or will I have a completely different approach? And that's going to be, it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, my personality plays a huge role in why I do the things I do. I'm just somebody who is predispositioned to find discipline really appealing. So to be somebody who gets up really early and, I have like my reading time and my reflection time and all these things, like to do that and then to stick to the same routine most days, a lot of that is just something that inherently appeals to me. So and so I'm also excited just to see how it works for you. If you do gravitate towards something that is maybe a little bit looser than what I have. Yeah. Just because so much of it is just I like things that are very structured and routine oriented, and that just, it works really well for me.
Yeah, I'm so curious because I just genuinely don't know. Yeah, it will be, well, we'll check in a year from now and
yeah, I'm really
things
excited.
will have changed, hopefully, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure things will have upgraded.
Yes, upgraded for you
We'll
and
have
for me.
upgraded. Well,
Okay, I'll adopt that term too.
I feel like there's upgrading in your life. I don't think it's possible not to upgrade when you have the kind of clarity that you now have.
Right.
It makes it so much easier to determine what is in service of you and what isn't. So I foresee an awful lot of upgrading in your future for sure.
Yay.
Yeah, so just a couple other areas I'll just kind of quickly, again, this is kind of a rough outline, so I don't have, nothing is completely set in stone, but as far as is like improving at teaching, this is actually something I heard Cal Newport talk about this past year, and I really like this idea of working on one aspect of your teach. So for me, teaching, this could be anything. Somebody who has a different kind of job might work on like a particular part of their professional skill set. But for me, it's like I want to get better at teaching, which is why it gets its own like separate thing.
Right.
And I have all these ideas of like things I want to do to make my teaching better. But again, now I've broken those up and those are going to get assigned to different quarters. I want to work on my lesson material, getting a little bit more, like putting some more stuff together and getting it more organized. I want to beef up like my student files. I created these student files this past year in Notion where I just have like notes from each lesson and I keep it all linked and I have like tasks attached to. So it keeps me on top of like things I have to do for students.
Right.
But I want to see if I can build that out a little bit more. I'd love to incorporate some kind of like a student portal or something where I can put resources for students. Like right now I use kind of a loose like Google Drive folder kind of thing where I'll put like lesson material for a student in the folder, but I want to see if I can come up with something a little bit more robust that has like lesson notes and objectives and things like that. So that'll be one thing I work on. And then so all my building a musical life stuff too, that's kind of, that crosses into a couple of different territories, but I want to do more with my building a musical life concept and process with my actual students. I've done a little bit, but I'm trying to put something together this year that'll be more cohesive.
Oh, cool.
So as far as my business goes and like my Michelle Manette music and expanding like my online presence and sharing stuff with people, my big ones are YouTube. So that's quarter one. I have these 3 performance videos I want to do. I'm going to designate each video for a different quarter. So quarter 2 and 3 and 4 each get their own video that I work on. So I have a good 3-month chunk to get them together because I suspect it's going to be a lot of work to get done. And then I have this building a musical life project that I'm actually working on that I'm going to be working on over the course of the year. So some of the things that I'm working on aren't necessarily designated to a specific quarter. They're just ongoing. So that'll be my project. That'll be this building a musical life project. My stoicism practice was the other one that's just going to be an ongoing thing. So that's just a little bit more of like, again, upgrading. So I already have practices in place, but I want to keep going with the journaling, with the reading and the studying, and turning words into works was the other note I made. And then I have a reading challenge. So last year I gave myself a challenge to finish reading 3 books every month, which would make it out to 36 by the end of the year, which I wasn't successful in terms of like finishing 3 books every month. Some months I did okay. Some months I did 1 or 2. And some months I did like, I think one month I did like 8 or 9. I just happened to finish a whole bunch within a short amount of time. So I'm going to keep going. So I think I ended up reading 40 this year. I'm going to keep that goal. So I want to read 40 books through 2024, but I'm going to break that into quarters again. So I'm going to do 10 per quarter.
Right.
So that it's a little bit more
flexible,
acknowledging of the fact that some months are just going to be busier than others. So like RPM is coming up in February. I know I'm just not going to have the same amount of time to read. Maybe more because I have like an hour I schedule in the mornings now that I didn't before when I did RPM last year. So I might be a little bit better, but just to make it a little bit more, again, a little bit more flexible. Like I'm still meeting this goal, but it'll be, not trying to get the same number each month because not every month looks different, which is one of the things I really like about planning on a quarterly basis is that within a quarter, like I can have a really busy month and then a really quiet month and still get everything done.
Right.
And the one other thing I wanted to add this year for my reading is like something to make me a better reader because now I have a really good reading habit in place, but I want to improve as a reader. So each quarter, I'm going to adopt some kind of a reading challenge. So whether it's reading something that is just challenging to read, or I'm reading something that like helps me become a better reader. So there's this book I got last year called how to read a book or something like that. It's like well known. Anybody who's listening to this who is big into reading has probably read it or heard about it.
Sounds familiar to me.
It's like it's supposed to be very good. So I'm probably gonna read that during one quarter just to upgrade my reading skills. And I'm gonna be reading. My mom got me this really beautiful edition of Homer's The Odyssey
nice.
and the Iliad. So I'm going to make that be my first reading challenge for the year. I'm going to read this edition and then I'm going to read another translation of both of these. And I'm going to do some like background digging too. So I'm going to find some videos, find some any resources, any like secondary resources I can to like better understand the text, which is another idea I got from Cal Newport. Which is to find these secondary sources to classic literature, or just reading in general, or movies or whatever, just where you're trying to like deepen your understanding. So anyways, yeah, that's sort of my rough outline for the year. And I'll probably update with specifics as we get into each quarter and as I kind of, get a better sense of what I'm going to be doing. But this is definitely, I think, the year I feel the most confident as well going into it.
For a rough outline, it sounds pretty thorough.
This is true. Yeah, it's and I think again that's where having a routine already in place and a schedule already in place is very helpful, because I know more or less what my days are going to look like in July. They're probably going to look very much the same as they do now. Of course, like life can happen and stuff can change and then I have to make some changes, but because now I'm already living in Ottawa, that was a big thing hanging over my head last year, was that I knew at some point a move to Ottawa was happening.
Right.
I just didn't know when. So that was always sort of like that sort of Damocles. Like I just knew it was like hanging over my head. Like it could just drop at any moment. I feel pretty confident that I'm not going to have a move to another city this year. So I feel like with that kind of off my plate, that helps a lot. So I feel more confident in my plan being something I can see through to the end of the year.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a new segment we're going to be introducing at the end of each episode. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing, Robyn?
Yeah. And I feel like this is going to be super helpful for me and hopefully helpful to you as well. But and we talked about this. We talked about the importance of accountability.
Yeah.
And so what we want to introduce is at the end of every episode, we will kind of lay out some of our goals for the week ahead, or maybe just a task that we want to complete or whatever. And then at the beginning of each episode, we can kind of check in with each other to see if we have accomplished what we kind of set out to do for the week. So we'll give it a try. It's new year, new us.
Yeah.
We'll give this a try and see if it is something that makes sense to continue doing. But I don't know. I think for me, it will be helpful to just have that accountability partner.
Same here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, that would be something too for anybody listening. If you want like an accountability partner, you might want to head over to our Discord channel. You can find a link in the show notes. It's still very empty right now. Like I've never run a Discord server before, but I've participated in a bunch of them, so it'll evolve over time. But I actually think I might add a channel specifically for like accountability.
Ooh,
so
I
that
love
we can have people like, right, here's the thing I'm working on, and then we can check in with them, because actually part of why I was able to sustain some of the new habits I adopted this year is because I had accountability partners. Like specifically, shout out to my accountability buddy Craig, who helped me get into the routine of getting up at 5 a.m. and committing to a morning journaling practice. We checked in with each other every day, and it was super duper helpful. So yeah, I think we'll I'm gonna add that channel actually after this conversation is done. So
yeah,
feel free to join. We're trying to build a robust and lively community of artistic and creative people, and so we have a place we can hold each other accountable, lift each other up, inspire each other, share our work, whatever it is, so please feel free to join. Any of you who haven't used Discord before, it's a little overwhelming at first, but you'll get the hang of it. It's once you get into it, it's one of my favorite places to be.
Woohoo.
So Robyn, do you want to kick it off then with what your focus is this week?
Yeah. So I have not painted since this spring, like since June, I think. I've
Okay.
done a couple little things here and there, but nothing significant. And I do feel like I want to make some small moves because I'm starting to get that kind of like I'm stressed that I've forgotten how. Which
Okay.
always happens when I'm kind of like out of the routine of painting for a while. I get fearful that I've lost my ability. But I had someone reach out about a commission, so
Mm.
and I say yes to commissions just because they're even when I'm not quite sure if it's going to be something I can pull off. I typically, as long as it's like a landscape, I've had people reach out to like do comic book type characters. I'm like, that is so far outside of what I do.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, someone reached out about a commission. So I'm going to this week. I want to sit down. I want to get just do some quick little exercises. Maybe just some color studies, like just to start kind of getting back into the studio and do some. I don't know if I'll start the commission, but at least kind of do some practice runs. Yeah, and that's kind of my goal for the week, just getting back into the studio, and it can be just a tiny step if it has to be, but I need to pick up a paintbrush again.
Yeah, I think that'll help alleviate a lot of that, maybe some of the anxiety you're feeling. Because I know I get really cranky if I go too long without playing guitar.
Yeah,
So even though I do music every day, I feel like I need to connect specifically with the guitar more often than I don't. Otherwise,
yeah.
it kind of like I just feel off. So I feel like once you're painting again, it'll just feel like, oh yeah, like this
It
is.
it's a bit tricky because I'm between series right now, right? And
Mhm.
I'm not ready for the new series. I don't even know what that's going to be yet, and I'm still kind of like I haven't got that kind of spark of an idea yet, but this is a good placeholder activity because it's a representational piece that I'd be doing, which is outside of the work I typically do.
Mhm.
Um, and again, it's just a good exercise. It's a bit more right brain versus left brain for me.
Mhm.
But it'll get me exercising that creative muscle a bit. So yeah.
Have you ever thought of having commission seasons? So to tie back to our episode on
Mm,
seasonality, where maybe when you have a season where you're working on a series that, if you find, let's say, doing a commission like disruptive to the flow of what you're creating, you could always have commission sort of be closed except in your sort of off series seasons. And then that's when they open up. And when you're in a headspace to then be doing just that
ooh,
kind of representational work.
I really like that idea. Yeah, I really like that idea because I was, for a time there, I thought I wouldn't go back to doing representational work. I thought like that was it. I was past that. But I have been feeling the itch to do it again. So
Mm.
this commission kind of came at a good time actually, because I've been thinking like if I do, like when I do get back into painting, it would probably be representational for a little bit until I kind of come up with the whatever my next series is. But I think that's a great idea. I'll have to, yeah, I'm gonna jot that down.
All right.
How about you? What do you want to accomplish this week?
So my personal development goal for the first quarter of the year is to get on top of my sleep. So specifically my evening routine, because my morning routine solid. I got that down. But my night routine not so much. Well, the routine itself is actually pretty good. It's just I don't always get it executed quickly enough. So I'm in bed too late. So my goal for this week is to start just right away developing a tighter routine so that I can be in bed ideally by 8:30 because I need some extra time to like do my journaling and do my reading. So because my goal is to have like my lights out and be ready to sleep at 9 o'clock because then that would give me 8 hours of sleep. So that's my goal for the week. Get in bed by 8:30.
And it makes me laugh that you're saying this. It's December 31st at the time of recording. So so New Year's Eve, and you're like 8:30. That's my goal.
Yeah. Who needs to stay up until midnight?
We know how it
Again,
works.
yeah. We've all seen the ball drop. It's it's the same every year. Yeah, no, I stopped staying up late on New Year's Eve years ago. It felt I don't know. It just I know how much damage it does to myself to stay up late, and so I'd rather start the new year fresh. And I'm also like, I'm doing the New Year, New You challenge from the Daily Stoic this year. Actually, it technically started today. We had the warm-up challenge today, but you know, I want to be able to get up early tomorrow and, you know, get a jump on that, get a jump on my reading.
Yeah.
So it just makes more sense to get to bed early tonight. And also because, you know, I like making changes where I can before the new year. Cause
right.
As we said, it's like that kind of pressure to like January 1st, like make all these changes is just too much. So anywhere where I can introduce improvement beforehand, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this will be interesting. I hope I can make it stick. Now that I've talked about it, probably.
Well, you have to, because the way this accountability thing works is that if you don't accomplish it, then I shame you next week.
You boo and you taunt me until your throat is sore. Yes.
That's right. That's right.
That sounds appropriate.
I feel like that's the best way to get someone to change, is to just bully them into it.
Shame and guilt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing's more effective than
Nothing
making them
is
feel
more effective.
terrible about themselves. No, I feel like sleep is one of those things when I am getting it, you know, to the degree I need, I'm everything's so much better, which is why I made that my personal development goal for the first quarter. So, you know, it's not live or die by this week, but this is just, it's a great challenge for me to kind of get back into the week. The other sort of like bonus challenge is just getting back into my routine again.
Yes.
You know, I did a lot of the same things this past week that I usually do, but definitely not to the same degree. So I got to get back into the usual routine. I'm happier. I'm happier when I'm doing my own thing. So yeah, it'll probably be pretty easy. The sleep has me a little worried. I don't know. I'm not always on my game that late in the evening because you get tired, right? And then you just feel like, you know, that's when I'll sort of like get distracted by something or whatever. So I think it's really gonna have to be about discipline. I have to let the discipline carry me into bed early.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to our 4th episode now of the Stream of Art podcast. Once again, please feel free to send us questions or comments to our email, streamofartpodcast@gmail.com. Again, we'd love to start some kind of a segment where we, you know, read questions and comments out, or, you know, potentially we could do a Q&A episode at some point in the future. So again, please feel free to share your thoughts, and we will see you in the next episode.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
I forgot about that.
Oh, that's right. Bye.